All right, before I start, I'd just like to preface this with something. We speak not for things material, but for people and ideas in the hopes that we may connect the two. And so I'd like you to take a look up at the screen, please. What I have here is a spiral. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to close your eyes and concentrate on the reality of that spiral. Go ahead, 5 seconds, eyes closed. Okay, now open your eyes. What if I was to tell you that that spiral is actually not a spiral at all? What it is a series of concentric circles. Go ahead, pick any portion, and you'll see it doesn't corkscrew into that singularity. Now, this is not just an opportunity to lie to you, although, that is fun. What it is an opportunity for you to experience what I like to call microcosmic enlightenment. It's enlightenment on a small scale. And that can boil down to one word: clarity. But the question of the day is, what does that enlightenment look like on a large scale? What does that enlightenment look like on the scale of life? And what does it look like when we get there? How do we get there? And what is the final destination? And we will see that through the lives of the Buddha and Gandhi, and through an analysis of a country, India, that has become almost synonymous with the notion of nirvana and awakening, that enlightenment is not this fallacious notion of a corkscrew or a spiral staircase. It's not a final success or a destination, a pinnacle or a zenith that we can reach by staring at our feet and hoping that we'll see a next story. In many ways, it is a new dimension, but we must achieve that by finding a circular harmony in our lives between our goal and our path, between our journey and our objective. So to see what exactly that means, we must begin more general, and with the life of the Buddha. So the Buddha is born 490 BCE in the town of Kapilavastu at the foothills of the Himalayas. So his name is Siddhartha Gautama, and there he's born into a wealthy family. His father is a provincial advisor and a member of the Kshatriya class, warrior ruler caste. And Siddhartha has everything he wants as a young child. He's spoiled. In fact, it's not until the age of 29 that he goes outside of his heavenly palace of isolation, and for the first time he sees suffering. He sees pain, he sees old age and disease and death. And he realizes that his wealth does not exempt him from these things. He is susceptible to suffering just like the next man. And so he defines a direction, a destination in his life, and that goal is to come closer to the notion of why we suffer, this foreign notion to him. And so his journey begins with meditation. And he learns from the best, but he does not get closer to his goal. And so he goes more extreme. And for 6 long years, 6 years, he wanders as a vagrant throughout the countryside as an ascetic. He's renounced the materialism we hold so dear. He's abjured the notion of adequate nourishment, and adequate food, and adequate shelter, and clothing that is so integral to our lives. But at the end of these 6 years, he takes one hard look at himself and he says no. He says, quote, "My body reached an extreme state of emaciation. My backside was like a buffalo's hoof. My backbone, bent or straight, was like corded beads, the jutting and broken rafters of an old house." And he's realized he spent so long concentrated on his own pain that he no longer has the cognitive capacity to understand that of others. And so he takes a break and he sits beneath his bodhisattva tree. And finally, he understands that he's missed in his life the other half of his circle. He's known his destination, but he has not known his journey. And so here he finally defines that. And that is what he calls his middle way, his equilibrium between the extreme asceticism of his adult life and the extreme materialism in his youth. And here he stops chasing a dream without understanding the stairs, and he finally fuses his path with his destination, and in doing so reaches enlightenment. So let's fast forward 2,000 years, and I'm going to tell you literally the exact same story again. This time about a guy named Gandhi. So Gandhi's born 1869 in Porbandar, what's now Gujarat, India. And at the age of 19, a sprightly young fellow, British clothing, decides to leave home, arrives in London, passes the bar, gets his law degree, and on a whim moves to South Africa. And he spends the next 20 years of his life working in South Africa as a lawyer. And it's there, in 1904, at the age of 35, that Gandhi has what I like to call his Rosa Parks moment. He's sitting on a public bus and he's forcibly removed because he won't give up his seat to a European. Forcibly removed. And much like the Buddha defined early on in his life a destination, here Gandhi defines a journey. And this is what he says later to, quote, "observe perfect chastity." He wants to be the change he wants to see in the world. He wants to embody the morality and the purity and the notion of justice and fairness that he wants to see. He realizes he must embody those things. His journey must be a fight to exemplify those characteristics if he wishes to see them in the world. And so he spends the next many years of his life working in South Africa during the Boer Wars with his ambulance corps, trying to see that purity in the world and trying to embody that. And in 1915 he moves back to India. But it's there that he reaches the depths of depression, much like the Buddha reached the depths of asceticism. Because it's there that Gandhi looks at this country, and soon to be the world's largest democracy, millions and millions of his own brethren, and he cannot empathize with their suffering. He sees in them the same emaciation that the Buddha saw in himself. He sees in them the same difficulty, the struggle to go from day to day just to live. He sees in them that same difficulty that Gandhi himself has never truly experienced, to the same extent that they have. And because he cannot empathize with them, he has tasked himself with changing a country that he does not truly understand. He has tasked himself with filling a glass full of water when he is blind to the reality of that glass. So when does Gandhi become this revolutionary man we know so well today? When does Gandhi reach enlightenment? And this is more nebulous than the Buddha because he doesn't have the sitting beneath the tree moment, you know? But what Gandhi does have is between 1915 and 1930. He writes of this time in his autobiography and he says, quote, "What I have been striving and pining to achieve these 30 years has been to see God face to face. It's in finally understanding and comprehending and getting back in touch with his religious roots that Gandhi understands not just his journey, but finally his destination. He stops following his feet and looks up and finally sees not just where he wants, not just how he wants to go, but where he wants to go." And so it's at this point that Gandhi reaches enlightenment. And he says of this notion of circular harmony that characterizes that enlightenment famously in the movie Gandhi, sitting on the shores of the Indian Ocean before he's about to start that salt march. He says, quote, "I've traveled so far, but all I've done is come back home. All I've done is come back home." So now that we've seen the very, very general and the very, very specific of these men's lives, what should India teach us about enlightenment? What should we take away from India and extract from this? And much like microcosmic enlightenment boils down to one word, macrocosmic enlightenment boils down to 6 stages. And these are my 6 stages to perfect enlightenment. The first is hardship. There has to be some impetus in your life for change. And it's from that impetus for change that you achieve identity. You identify that thing in your life, either your journey or your destination, that comes to define a new chapter. For the Buddha, that identity was found in the notion of getting closer to suffering. And for Gandhi, that was found in the desire to observe perfect chastity and be the change in the world. But because you only have half of that circle, because your life is a spiral staircase and not that Buddhist mandala we saw earlier, you achieve failure. 6 years of intolerable pain getting you no closer to your goal, I would define that as failure. Coming back to a country you do not truly comprehend and tasking yourself with changing it when you not only do not know yourself, but you do not truly know the people that you wish to influence, to some degree that is a failure. But from that failure comes rendezvous, comes realization that you need to reconnect, that you're missing half of your circle. And from that realization comes connection, where you finally understand that you're missing that other half and you decide what that is. So what is stage 6? What could be beyond personal enlightenment? And stage 6 is acceptance. You know, when I look at someone's life, I see 2 concentric circles, much like that initial optical illusion. The first circle is a harmony between where you want to go in life and how you want to get there, between your path and your destination. And that's stages 1 through 5. But the second circle, the outer circle, is a harmony between your life being your journey and death being the ultimate destination. And as morbid as that sounds, it's in accepting death and ceasing to fear death that you not only reach personal enlightenment, but you reach that second dimension of enlightenment, that you achieve stage 6. And while life is not always as difficult as a cross-country race, it is sometimes much, much more arduous. And it's in accepting the ultimate destination and ceasing to fear it that you can not only become perfectly enlightened, but you can become as revolutionary as Gandhi was and the Buddha was. You know, I run cross-country, and when you're standing on that starting line, the only thing in your mind is pain. In fact, it's not until you're about 200 meters from the finish line and you can finally see it that you say, hey, there will be an end to the suffering, the pain will cease, there's a finale to this difficult, arduous journey I've been on for the last 20 minutes. This crazy roller coaster, and it's from there that you realize, if I had accepted that fear, if I'd accepted the difficulty of the end at Genesis, at the beginning of that race, I would have PR'd because I would have run without fear. Because as the Buddha famously said, he said, quote, all elements of personality are subject to decay. Everything that makes you you will die when you die. Your life will be gone. But what is eternal, what is forever, is your existence. It is the mark you leave on this world. And that existence, much like a PR in cross-country, is a PR in life. That existence is the mark that you leave, and you can only leave the best mark that you are capable of when you no longer fear that that mark will maybe never be indelible. When you cease to fear, you live and you exist. So I'd like to leave you with this final quote. You know, if you take nothing else away from what India should have taught you about enlightenment, if you take nothing else away from this speech, at least understand this. The Buddha said, sitting beneath that bodhisattva tree, he says, quote, let only skin, sinew, and bone remain. Let the flesh and blood dry in my body, but I will not give up this seat. I will not give up this seat until I attain complete awakening. And it's in this desire, if you have that desire, that burning desire in your lives, in your moments where you can achieve complete concentration, and you have that opportunity to change yourself and potentially be revolutionary and change this world, strive on untiringly, because you have that opportunity to make a difference. And India has shown you how you can do that. India has given you these 6 stages to enlightenment. And the only thing left in your mind right now should be, how badly do you want it?